The Mafia boss thought he'd seen every cruelty and lost every shred of his heart long ago. But one night he discovered that his quiet, struggling waitress secretly gave away half her meager paycheck to a crumbling orphanage, and it shook him to the core. The revelation chipped at the ice around his soul and unearthed ghosts of a past he'd buried deep. Now the most feared man in the city will confront his own darkness and rain hell on anyone who threatens the gentle light that has ignited something inside him. Dante Costa surveyed the dimly lit dining room of La Trattoria Vera, one of the upscale Italian restaurants in his portfolio. The last patrons had left half an hour ago, and now only the staff remained, wiping down tables and cashing out the register. Dante rarely involved himself in the day-to-day operations of his legitimate businesses, but tonight he found himself restless and drawn to this place for reasons he didn't fully understand. Perhaps it was the soft strains of jazz playing after closing, or the memory of a simpler time that the warm, garlicky air evoked, or perhaps it was her. His gaze tracked the petite waitress methodically stacking menus by the host stand. Sophia Miller moved with quiet efficiency, her dark brown hair slipping from its low bun in a few loose strands around her face. She wore the plain black server's uniform like armor, shoulders squared despite the obvious weariness in her eyes. Dante had noticed her before in passing. How could he not? She was polite, unobtrusive, and good at her job, never seeking attention. In fact, she actively avoided it. He'd seen her deflect a flirtatious customer with a firm but gentle refusal, and endure a rude diner's complaints without ever losing her composure. There was a strength in her silence that piqued his interest. Tonight, that interest had grown into a nagging curiosity he couldn't ignore. As owner, Dante could request a full report on any employee. He could have Nico and HR pull Sophia's file in minutes, but the urge to truly understand her went beyond what dry paperwork could provide. He wanted to know what lay behind those guarded hazel eyes and the sad little smiles she gave as she pocketed tips. That unsettled him. Dante wasn't a man who wondered about the personal lives of his staff. Yet here he was, lingering in the back of his own restaurant, watching the last waitress clean up, trying to puzzle her out. A sharp bark of laughter cut through the mellow music, drawing Dante's attention to the kitchen doorway. Marco, the restaurant manager, had emerged, shaking his head as he counted cash from the register receipts. Dante stayed still in the shadows by a column, unseen for the moment. He observed as Sophia stiffened, her back still turned to the manager. She finished aligning the menus before replying evenly, "I counted everything twice. It should be all there." "Should be, but isn't," Marco snapped, waving a stack of bills. "We're missing about $20 from the register. Third time this month, Sophia." Dante narrowed his eyes. "Missing money?" His establishments had strict rules. Theft by employees was not tolerated. A flicker of disappointment twisted in his gut. Was he wrong about her? Sophia turned, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. Her face was calm but a shade paler. "I'm not sure why it's short. I can double-check the receipts." "Already did," Marco interrupted, stepping closer. He was a stout man in his 40s with graying temples, and he took pride in running a tight ship. "You had register duty before close, didn't you?" Sophia nodded, swallowing. "Yes, but I didn't take any money. I balanced it like I always do." Marco huffed. "Then where's the 20? Customers don't tip with invisible cash. This is coming out of your paycheck if it isn't found." Dante felt a prickle of anger. Marco's accusatory tone was grating. He held back, wanting to see how Sophia responded. Instead of panicking, she drew a slow breath. "If it's truly missing, I'll cover it," she said quietly. "I'll bring 20 from home tomorrow to make it right." She didn't sound guilty, just tired. Dante noted the defeat in her voice, how she acquiesced so quickly to paying from her own pocket. A thief would protest more or spin excuses. Sophia did neither. Marco frowned, clearly thrown off by her calm capitulation. "Damn right you will," he muttered, shoving the cash into an envelope. "This is the last straw, Sophia. If the register comes up short again, I'll have to let you go. I don't care how much the customers like you. I can't have an employee I can't trust." Dante's jaw tightened. Something felt off. If she were truly stealing, $20 was a paltry sum to risk her job over, especially repeatedly. If she needed money that badly, he suspected she'd take more at once or find another way. This seemed more like someone overworked or distracted. "Understood," Sophia replied softly. There was a tremble in her tone that only someone listening closely might catch. "May I finish my side work now?" Marco waved a dismissive hand. "Just hurry up. I want to lock up in 15. He turned and nearly collided with Dante, who had stepped out of the shadows. Marco's eyes bulged in surprise. "Mr. Costa," he blurted, almost dropping the envelope of cash. Sophia's head jerked toward them. She clearly hadn't realized anyone else was there. Her hazel eyes went wide as she took in Dante's presence, tall, broad-shouldered, clad in a tailored charcoal suit that did nothing to soften the aura of menace around him. In the low light, his sharp features were all hard angles and shadow. Dante saw recognition flicker on her face. She knew he was someone important, even if she might not know the full extent of who he truly was. "Sir, I didn't know you were here," Marco stammered, straightening. "I was just handling a discrepancy." "I gathered," Dante said coolly. His dark eyes shifted from the manager to Sophia, who stood a few steps away, hands clenched around a cleaning rag. There was a flash of something like fear in her expression as she met Dante's gaze. Then she lowered her eyes, shoulders tight with apprehension. Dante addressed Marco evenly. "I'll take it from here. Finish the closing paperwork." Marco glanced between them. "Sir, it's no trouble. I can... now." Dante's voice was soft but carried unquestionable authority. Marco nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Costa. I'll, be in the office if you need me." He hurried off to the back, leaving Dante and Sophia alone in the dining area. For a moment, neither spoke. Sophia broke the silence first. "Mr. Costa," she began, her voice respectful but edged with worry. "I'm sorry about the register. I don't know what happened, but I'll replace the money first thing tomorrow. I never meant for it to be a problem." Dante studied her quietly. Up close, he could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself so tightly, bracing for the worst. She was afraid he would fire her on the spot, perhaps, or worse. Men in his position carried all sorts of reputations. Maybe she'd heard whispers about him. Most people had, even if they pretended otherwise. "You've worked here 2 years, yes?" he asked, voice level. She nodded uncertainly. "Just about, sir." "In that time, have you ever stolen from me or this restaurant?" The question made her flinch. "No, never." Dante believed her. The truth rang clear in her eyes. "I didn't think so." He slipped his hands into his suit pockets and took a slow step forward. Sophia held her ground, chin lifting almost imperceptibly. There was that quiet strength again. "Marco can be overzealous," Dante said, tone gentler. "If there's an issue with the count, we'll get to the bottom of it. No one's firing anyone tonight." Sophia blinked, visible relief washing over her delicate features. "You're not letting me go?" He almost smiled at how astonished she sounded. "Not over $20, no. Mistakes happen." She let out a breath, nearly a sigh. "Thank you, sir." Dante tilted his head slightly. "I admire integrity in my employees. Offering to cover a shortfall from your own pay." He let the sentence hang, watching her reaction. Her cheeks colored faintly. "It's my responsibility," she said after a moment. "The drawer was under on my watch. Even if I don't know what went wrong, it's only right that I make it right." Such earnestness. It stirred a faint memory in Dante, a time when honor meant something simpler, before his world had become so corrupted. The thought tugged at him briefly. He pushed it aside. "Commendable," he murmured. Another pause fell. The restaurant was nearly silent now, just the faint clink of dishes being washed in the kitchen, and the soft jazz on the speakers. Sophia shifted on her feet. "If there's nothing else, sir, I should finish closing up." He realized she was eager to escape his scrutiny, and he understood. People often felt uneasy in his presence. He was used to that. But with her, he found he didn't want her to fear him. He wanted her to feel safe. The realization was surprising. "Go ahead," he said, stepping back. As she turned to resume wiping down a nearby table, he added, "And Sophia?" She looked back, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes?" "It's late. You shouldn't walk home alone." He glanced toward the dark windows. The neon sign outside was already off, leaving the street beyond in shadows between sparse pools of lamplight. This neighborhood empties out after midnight. She gave a polite, if cautious, smile. I appreciate the concern, but I'll be fine. My apartment's only a few blocks. I walk it most nights. Dante frowned slightly. A few blocks in this part of the city could be a gauntlet at this hour. At least let one of my drivers take you. Really, it's okay, she insisted gently. I don't want to trouble anyone. He didn't like the idea of her out there alone. But he could see her resolve, fiercely independent this one. Pushing further might only spook her. All right. He relented for now, though the decision sat poorly with him. If that's what you prefer. Thank you, Mr. Costa, she said softly. Dante moved aside as she carried a stack of folded linens to a bin. She smelled faintly of vanilla and coffee, an oddly comforting combination. He watched her disappear into the kitchen to finish her tasks, his mind already turning over the puzzle of the missing $20, and more pressingly, the puzzle of Sophia herself. Trust. Either she didn't trust being alone with him or his people, a wise instinct perhaps, or she was simply used to relying only on herself. Likely both, he decided. He stepped outside into the crisp night air. He motioned to the driver, Tony, who was leaning against the hood of Dante's black Mercedes smoking a cigarette. Tony stubbed it out and straightened at once. Heading home, boss. Not yet, Dante murmured. His breath puffed lightly in the cold as he cast a glance back through the front window of the restaurant. Sophia emerged from the back, shrugging on a thin, worn jacket. Far too light for the chilly November weather, he noted grimly. Tony followed his gaze and lifted an eyebrow in silent question. Dante rarely explained himself, but Tony had been with him long enough to sense when his boss's focus had landed on something, or someone, important. Wait here, Dante ordered. Tony nodded, moving to open the car's rear door automatically. But Dante didn't get in. Instead, he lingered near the restaurant entrance. A moment later, Sophia came out, locking the door behind her. She startled slightly upon seeing Dante still there. Oh, I thought you'd left, she said, pulling her purse strap higher on her shoulder. I'm on my way now, he replied evenly. You're heading home? She bobbed her head and mustered a polite smile. Yes. Good night, Mr. Costa. She began to turn, but Dante took a step forward. Sophia. Her name rolled off his tongue more intimately than he intended. She paused, looking up at him expectantly. He had meant only to urge her one last time to accept a ride, but what came out was different. Where are you really going? Her brow creased. I told you, just home. Dante studied her closely. There, it was again, the slightest hesitation, that guarded flicker in her eyes. Perhaps just home wasn't the whole story. Why would she lie? All right, he said after a beat, not pressing further. Be safe. He retreated to his car, but instead of climbing into the back seat, he slipped into the front passenger side and lowered the window partway. Sophia gave a small wave goodnight and set off down the street at a brisk walk. As soon as she was half a block away, Dante spoke low to Tony. Give her a minute, then follow. Lights off. Tony's eyes flicked to the slim figure retreating into the darkness, then back to Dante. He knew better than to question. Yes, boss. In one smooth motion, he slid behind the wheel. Dante stayed low in his seat as Tony eased the Mercedes away from the curb, headlights off, trailing Sophia from a discreet distance. Dante kept his eyes on her silhouette ahead. He told himself this was merely to make sure she got home safely. But he knew it was more. Something about Sophia Miller didn't add up, and he meant to find out what it was. She walked quickly, arms crossed against the chill. The street lights illuminated her path in pools of pale amber as she moved through mostly empty streets. Dante's phone vibrated with a text, likely one of his men reporting on some routine matter, but he ignored it. his attention riveted on Sophia. After a few blocks, she didn't turn toward the residential area where many of his employees lived. Instead, she continued straight toward a rougher part of town. Boarded-up storefronts and graffiti-tagged walls marked the transition. Dante leaned forward, concern sparking. What business would she have here at this hour? The orphanage. The thought struck him suddenly. He vaguely recalled hearing her mention something about an orphanage once, perhaps in passing to a coworker. The words surfaced from his memory like a riddle piece locking into place. Sophia turned down a side street where only one flickering lamp provided scant light. Tony hung back skillfully, the car's engine a mere purr in the silence. Up ahead, Dante saw Sophia pause under the lamplight and glance around, as if checking for tails. She rubbed her hands together, then pressed on. Dante felt a pang of, worry? The scene was too familiar, a lone figure vulnerable in the night. He pushed away the unpleasant churn of emotion and tapped the partition separating him from Tony. That's close enough. I'll go on foot, he said. Tony met his gaze in the rear view, concerned. Boss, you sure you don't want backup? Dante popped open the glove compartment and retrieved a handgun, sliding it beneath his coat at the waistband. I'm sure. Keep the engine running. Tony nodded tightly. Dante exited the car with practiced stealth, closing the door softly. The November night air bit through his suit jacket as he moved swiftly along the sidewalk, keeping to the shadows. Up ahead, Sophia approached a chain-link fence that encircled a dark, empty lot. She stopped at a padlocked gate. By the weak glow of a nearby street lamp, Dante watched her slip through a narrow gap where the chain left enough slack, a gap clearly well used. Beyond the fence loomed a hulking, decrepit building. A faded sign by the gate read St. Catherine's Home for Children. The orphanage. Dante's chest tightened in realization. What was she doing here at nearly 1 a.m.? Staying several paces behind, he followed her through the gate, careful not to let the chain rattle. Sophia hurried up a cracked walkway toward the orphanage's side door. The structure itself was haunting in the dark. Once red brick, now blackened with grime and webbed with creeping ivy. Several windows were boarded up, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. Sophia produced a key and unlocked the side door, slipping inside. Dante approached silently, positioning himself by a broken window to peer in. His heartbeat drummed in his ears as he crouched low. Inside, a single dim light was on in what looked like a small office or foyer. He saw Sophia standing with an older woman, a stooped, silver-haired lady in a threadbare cardigan. The woman's face was creased with worry and relief. Sophia pressed a slim envelope into the woman's weathered hands. It's half my pay for this week, he heard her say softly through the cracked window. I know it's not much, but it should cover the heating bill. Dante's breath caught. Half her pay? He edged closer, straining to hear. The older woman opened the envelope and gasped, eyes welling. Sophia, child, this is too much. You barely make enough to get by yourself. Sophia shook her head firmly. The kids need heat more than I need anything else. I can get by. I always do. The woman, Sister Margaret, Dante guessed, pressed a hand to her mouth, overcome. Bless you, dear. Without you, I don't know how we'd keep the lights on. She reached out and pulled Sophia into a gentle hug. We won't forget this. Sophia returned the embrace, closing her eyes. This place is the only home I had. I won't forget it either. Dante felt something twist sharply in his chest. He suddenly understood. Sophia had grown up here, an orphan. And now, despite barely scraping by herself, she was sacrificing what little she earned to keep this dying orphanage alive. The realization hit him like a punch. Margaret drew back, patting Sophia's cheek with a trembling smile. You're a good girl. The world hasn't been kind to you, yet here you are, giving when you have so little yourself. Sophia offered a tiny, self-conscious shrug. I have enough. They deserve whatever I can give. Just then, a small child wandered out from a dormitory hallway, rubbing her eyes. Sophia immediately knelt and gathered the girl, perhaps 6 years old with sleep-mussed hair and clutching a threadbare teddy bear, into her arms. She soothed the little one with gentle words and a promise she'd be back soon. The child calmed, sleepy and reassured, and Sophia pressed a loving kiss to her hair before sending her back to bed. Watching Sophia's quiet grace with the child shook Dante to his core. He felt like a trespasser on something sacred. Her world was built on kindness and sacrifice, so starkly different from his own of fear and violence. Swallowing hard, Dante eased back into the darkness outside. When Sophia finally stepped out of the orphanage and into the cold night, he remained hidden, determined to silently watch over her on the way home. No sooner had she started down the street than 3 figures slunk out of a shadowy doorway ahead of her. Dante's eyes narrowed. Predators. A lethal focus swept over him as adrenaline pumped through his veins, honed by years of dealing with threats. One of the young men stepped into Sophia's path, forcing her to stop short. 2 others fanned out, smirking under the weak streetlights. She clutched her purse tightly to her side. Well, what do we have here?" drawled the leader, a lanky guy with a shaved head and a snake tattoo coiling up his neck. He looked Sophia up and down with a leering grin. "Out for a stroll all alone, pretty lady?" "It's late," Sophia said, voice low but steady. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to get home." The second thug, shorter and jittery, chuckled as he circled to her other side. "No trouble at all," he sneered. "Maybe you could spare some cash for a nightcap for us, huh?" He nodded at her purse. Sophia backed up a step, heart thudding visibly at her throat. The third, a beefy teen with a gold tooth, licked his lips. "We'll even walk you home after," he added, eliciting a snicker from the others. Dante's blood boiled. He'd hoped to avoid revealing himself to her like this, but he would not stand by and let these vermin lay a hand on her. One of them reached out toward Sophia. "Don't touch me," she began, her voice taut with fear beneath the bravado. She didn't have to scream. Dante moved with lethal speed. In the blink of an eye, one thug was on his knees howling in pain. A second's knife was knocked to the ground as he crumpled, and the third bolted in terror down the street. In seconds it was over. The 3 punks stumbled and ran off into the night, dragging their injured companions and peppering the darkness with curses and pained groans that soon faded. Dante stood in their wake, chest heaving with quiet fury. He turned to Sophia, dread pooling in his gut. How would she react? He had let slip the wolf behind his civilized mask. Sophia pressed back against the brick wall, eyes huge in the dimness. She knew it was him. He was close enough now for her to recognize his face. She was trembling, from adrenaline or fear or both. You followed me?" she asked, voice unsteady. Dante couldn't quite read her tone. Shock, confusion, a hint of fright. He kept his hands loose at his sides, non-threatening. "I was concerned," he said quietly. "This isn't a safe area. You said you'd be fine, but clearly—" He gestured vaguely toward the direction the attackers had fled. Sophia glanced down the street, then back at him. Her arms were wrapped around herself. "How much did you see?" she whispered. He inclined his head, honesty the only option. "Enough." She closed her eyes, a mixture of embarrassment and resignation crossing her features. I didn't want anyone from work to know." "Why not?" Her eyes opened, suddenly flashing. "Because it's none of their business." "None of yours either, Mr. Costa." Her defensiveness couldn't hide the quaver in her voice. She was afraid he might belittle what she'd been doing. Or worse, put a stop to it. Dante's expression softened. "You're right. It's not my business." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I made it mine when I saw one of my employees slipping off into a dangerous part of town late at night. I had to make sure you were okay." She looked away, uncertainty in the set of her jaw. "So now you know," she murmured. "I help out the orphanage when I can. Go ahead and think it's foolish." "Foolish?" he echoed, almost incredulous. "Hardly." That made her look up. She searched his face. "Then, what do you think?" Dante took a slow step closer. Her back was still against the wall, but she didn't shrink from him. "I think," he said, voice low, "that you're doing something incredibly selfless and dangerous coming out here alone. You shouldn't have to do it by yourself." Sophia blinked rapidly. He saw tears glint before she hurriedly wiped them away with the back of her hand. "If I don't, who will?" she whispered. The simple, despairing truth of those words hit Dante like a knife. He had resources beyond measure, an army of men at his beck and call, and yet he'd been oblivious to suffering like this in his own city. What was $20 from a till compared to the sacrifice this girl made every week without any expectation of reward? His voice came out rougher than he intended. "You shouldn't have to carry that burden alone." Sophia bit her lip. The city has its priorities, she said bitterly. If an orphanage of a dozen kids has to close, nobody in charge blinks twice. Dante's hands curled into fists at his sides, not in anger at her, but at the nameless faces of city officials and developers who would casually toss aside these children. He took a steadying breath. Not on my watch, he found himself saying. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? Before he could answer, she swayed on her feet. The adrenaline crash and exhaustion were catching up to her. Dante instinctively reached out. You're in shock, he said gently. Let me take you home. Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but the fight had drained out of her. After a beat, she nodded. Good. He stepped closer, and in a gesture that surprised them both, draped his coat over her shoulders. The thick wool practically swallowed her, but she drew it around herself with a small murmur of thanks. Dante guided her toward where Tony idled in the Mercedes a short distance down the street. When Tony saw Dante emerging from the shadows with Sophia at his side, he snapped to attention, opening the back door. Sophia hesitated only a moment before allowing Dante to help her inside. He slid in beside her, and Tony pulled away, this time with headlights on. In the quiet cocoon of the car, Sophia stared at her hands, presumably still processing the night's events. Dante could see a faint bruise forming on her temple, where one of the thugs might have grabbed her earlier. Rage simmered again at the thought. After a minute of silence, he asked softly, Are you all right? She exhaled slowly. I will be. Thanks to you. The sincerity in her tone tugged at something in him. He had heard gratitude plenty of times before. Forced, perfunctory thanks from those who feared him or owed him. This was different. You're safe now, he said, as if stating a fact he was determined to keep true. He then added almost awkwardly, I'm sorry I invaded your privacy. Following you. Sophia shook her head. You saved me. I can't really be angry about that. She managed a tiny, tired smile. Even if you did scare me half to death in the process. A wry huff escaped him, half a chuckle. Understandable. She glanced at him sidelong. I suppose I should be thanking you, not giving you attitude. Dante gave a faint smile. I've had worse responses to my help. Her lips curved just a little. Silence fell again, but it was warmer now. Soon the Mercedes rolled to a stop in front of a narrow, run-down apartment building. Sophia's home, presumably. Tony discreetly remained in the driver's seat, engine idling. Before Sophia could slip out of the coat and exit, Dante held out a hand. Wait! She looked at him, brow raised in question. Dante cleared his throat. He was suddenly uncertain how to say what he needed to. Finally, he settled on, I'd like to discuss all of this, the orphanage, and how I can help. Sophia's eyes widened. Mr. Costa, you don't have to— I know I don't have to, he interrupted gently. I want to. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to read behind his dark eyes. Evidently, she found earnestness there, because her shoulders relaxed a fraction. All right, she said softly. Maybe we can talk later. Dante nodded. Tomorrow. I'll have my driver pick you up after your shift. A beat passed, then Sophia offered the coat back to him. He shook his head. Keep it for now. But it's cold, he insisted. Consider it a loan. She yielded, bundling the expensive coat around herself. Thank you, Dante. He realized it was the first time she'd spoken his first name. It sounded beautiful on her lips. Warmth bloomed in his chest where so often there was only ice. Good night, Sophia. Good night, she replied, hesitating. Then, with a final small smile, she slipped out of the car. Dante watched to make sure she entered her building safely. Only once the lobby door closed behind her did he release the breath he'd been holding. His mind was already racing ahead. Plans, calculations, possibilities. There was much to be done before tomorrow. Home, boss? Tony asked quietly from the front. Dante's gaze lingered a moment on the dimly lit apartment windows where Sophia had disappeared. Yes, he said at last. Home. His voice had an unfamiliar note of optimism. As the car pulled away, Dante allowed himself a rare smile in the darkness. Tonight had shaken him deeply, but strangely, he no longer felt adrift. He felt purpose. Within a week, the orphanage's prayers were answered. Through a maze of shell companies, Dante anonymously cleared St. Catherine's debts and paid for urgent repairs. Sophia was overjoyed when Sister Margaret tearfully informed her that a miracle donation had come through. Dante quietly savored the sight of Sophia's bright smile the afternoon she got the news. She must have suspected who the secret benefactor was, because after her shift, she approached him, eyes shining with gratitude that rendered him momentarily speechless. "You," she said in a breath, stopping beside the corner booth where he sat. There were no adequate words, just that single syllable laden with wonder and thanks. Dante gave a small shrug, trying for nonchalance. "It seems the restaurant's charitable foundation needed an end-of-year write-off," he murmured, not quite meeting her eye. Sophia's answering laugh was shaky. She slid into the seat across from him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, voice trembling. "You don't have to." But she reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. The contact sent a current of warmth up his arm. Sophia's touch was light, almost unsure, but when he turned his palm to clasp her smaller hand, she squeezed firmly. Tears clung to her lashes. "Thank you," she said again with feeling. Dante swallowed past an unexpected tightness in his throat. "I'm just glad the kids will be all right." For a moment they sat like that, hands joined, a universe of understanding passing between them. Dante realized he wanted to pull her closer, to feel more of that warmth she radiated. It took considerable willpower to gently release her hand as a few customers wandered in for the early dinner hour. Sophia stepped back from the booth, but not before giving him one last radiant look, the kind of smile that made Dante believe, for the first time in ages, that he might be doing something genuinely good. He knew then that he was irrevocably invested in her cause. In her. That night, a gnawing worry sent Dante driving toward Sophia's apartment with Tony at the wheel. His gut told him something was wrong. As they sped through the city streets, Dante's phone rang, the caller ID blocked. He answered with a terse, "Yes." "Costa. Good evening," drawled a voice Dante recognized at once as Salvatore Esposito. Dante's blood went cold. "Esposito," he replied in a deadly quiet tone. "Bold of you to call me." "Well," said the rival mob boss in a faux friendly lilt. "I figured we should chat, given the circumstances." Dante's free hand curled into a fist on his knee. He signaled Tony silently. The driver understood, pushing the car faster through traffic. "What circumstances?" Dante asked, though he suspected he already knew. "It seems you've been poking your nose into my business ventures." "Not very polite," Esposito tutted. "You snatched up a certain property out from under me." Dante's jaw tightened. "So, it was about the orphanage land. If you have a problem with me, Sal, you know where to find me. We can settle this between ourselves." A low chuckle crackled through the phone. "Oh, we will. But it so happens I already found something, or rather someone, important to you." A chill shot through Dante. His worst fear solidified with each of Esposito's smug words. Esposito continued, casual as if discussing the weather. "Sweet little thing, isn't she? That waitress of yours who likes to play savior at the orphanage. Don't worry, she's alive. For now." Dante's vision flashed red. "If you've hurt her," he growled. "Temper, temper," Esposito chided, clearly relishing Dante's slip. "The girl's my guest at the moment. Whether she remains unharmed is entirely up to you." Tony's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, alarmed by the murderous fury twisting Dante's expression. Dante forced steel into his voice. "What do you want?" "Simple. That orphanage property you stole from me? You're going to sign it over. Tonight. Then maybe this pretty Sophia goes home safe and sound." Dante's heart slammed against his ribs. Sophia. Kidnapped. And because of him. He had thought he was protecting her by handling things quietly, but his interference had put a target on her back. "Where and when?" Dante bit out, keeping his voice cold to mask the turmoil inside. Old Pier 9, at the abandoned steel mill. 1 hour, Esposito purred. Come alone with the deed. No tricks, or the girl dies. And Dante, if I even think you're playing games, you'll be delivering a corpse. The call disconnected. Dante slowly lowered the phone, every muscle in his body taut with barely restrained panic and fury. Tony, he said evenly, though his voice trembled just a hair. Head to Pier 9. Now. Tony's knuckles whitened on the wheel as he swung toward the riverfront. Boss, maybe we should call Nico and the crew. They'll be nearby, Dante interjected, yanking open the car's safe box to retrieve extra magazines and a Kevlar vest. But out of sight. I'm going in alone first. Tony grimaced but nodded. He knew Dante would risk anything for this woman now. As the car raced through the city, Dante assembled everything he needed: the orphanage property deed and transfer, papers, a comm earpiece to signal his men, and enough weaponry to start a small war. His mind churned through strategies, layouts, worst-case scenarios. But one image kept trying to surface. Sophia's face, terrified and at the mercy of that animal. Dante had to clamp down on the surge of terror it brought and replace it with resolve. He would get her back. The Mercedes screeched to a halt a few blocks from Pier 9. Dante could see the hulking silhouette of the abandoned steel mill against the moonlit sky. A few windows glowed with dim light. Esposito's men were already there. Dante turned to Tony. Meet Nico 2 blocks north. Tell him to position our people around the mill quietly. No one moves in until my signal. Tony swallowed, looking as if he wanted to protest. But he simply said, Be careful, boss. Dante nodded once and stepped out into the darkness, briefcase in one hand, a concealed handgun tucked at his back. The cold air smelled of rust and the nearby Hudson. He approached the mill cautiously. 2 of Esposito's thugs emerged from the shadows at the entrance, rifles in hand. They frisked him brusquely, removing his pistol. Dante allowed it, muscles coiled, eyes drinking in every detail inside. They escorted him into a cavernous, empty warehouse. Portable lamps cast harsh white light and long shadows. Dante's gaze immediately found Sophia. She was tied to a metal support pillar at the center of the space, ropes binding her wrists behind the post. A strip of duct tape covered her mouth. Despite a bruise darkening her cheek and fear shining in her eyes, she looked alive, alert even. Relief flooded Dante so powerfully he nearly staggered. Salvatore Esposito stepped forward from beside Sophia, a smug grin on his fleshy face. He was flanked by a half-dozen armed goons. Right on time, he sneered. I knew a man like you wouldn't abandon someone valuable. Sophia made a muffled sound behind the tape, straining a little when Dante's eyes met hers. Dante could see tears of frustration or fear pooling there. Hang on, he tried to tell her silently. I'm here. You have what I want? Esposito demanded, jerking Dante's attention back. His piggy eyes flicked to the briefcase. Dante held it up. The signed deed transfer. Release her and it's yours. Esposito laughed, pulling a knife from his coat. The blade gleamed as he pressed it lightly under Sophia's chin, making her wince. I'll be taking it regardless. But sure, hand it over and I'll consider letting her go. Dante's teeth ground together. He needed her away from that knife and out of the line of fire. His men would be in position by now, waiting for his signal. Likely the sound of gunfire. Slowly, Dante set the briefcase on the concrete floor and nudged it forward with his foot. One of Esposito's goons scooped it up and opened it for his boss. Esposito glanced at the contents and gave a satisfied grunt. Looks in order. He snapped his fingers. One thug stepped behind Sophia and ripped the duct tape off her mouth. Sophia gasped, coughing at the sudden pain. Dante, no! She managed, her voice hoarse. Hush now, Esposito cooed, still holding her by the neck. We'll be done soon. To Dante, he said, Here's the deal. You walk out, I let the girl walk out. You try anything funny. He dragged the flat of the knife across Sophia's cheek in a mock caress. She flinched. Dante saw red. Take the deed and let her go. Now, Dante growled. His eyes never left Sophia's face. Her eyes never left his. Esposito smirked. Toss him over with the others, he barked. Two of his men grabbed the briefcase and retreated a safe distance, examining the papers inside. For a moment, Dante thought Esposito might actually honor his word. The knife moved away from Sophia's throat, but instead of untying her, the man's beefy arm tightened around her neck. Dante caught a flicker of malice in Esposito's grin. You know, Esposito mused, I did a little digging on dear Sophia here. Tragic story. He pressed his cheek next to hers. Sophia turned her face away, trembling with anger and revulsion. Did you ever tell him what happened to Mommy and Daddy, sweetheart? Dante's muscles went rigid. What the hell was he doing? Esposito went on, taunting. No? Let me enlighten you, Costa. Many years ago, a stubborn fellow, her father, refused to pay respect to the family running his neighborhood. We had to send a message. He tutted as if regretful. The fire that took her parents wasn't an accident after all. A muffled sob tore from Sophia's throat. Dante's heart all but stopped. Fire. He recalled her telling him her parents died violently. His stomach churned with rage and grief as realization dawned. Esposito was the one responsible. Sophia's shock turned to fury in an instant. With a wild cry, she drove her elbow back into Esposito's ribs with all her might. The bigger man grunted, loosening his grip. Dante seized that moment. He lunged forward like a bolt of lightning. In one fluid motion, he locked an iron grip around Esposito's knife arm before the man could react. The blade sliced a shallow line across Dante's forearm as he wrenched the arm aside. With a snarl, Dante slammed the rival boss backward. Now! Dante bellowed, voice echoing. Gunshots burst from the high windows and doorways as Nico and Dante's crew opened fire with deadly precision. Chaos erupted, muzzle flashes lighting up the cavern, bullets sparking off metal beams. Esposito's men scrambled for cover, shouting in panic as they were cut down one by one. Dante focused only on Sophia. He knocked aside Esposito's swiping knife and landed a punishing elbow to the man's face. Cartilage cracked. Esposito howled, blood spurting from his nose. Dante then spun and delivered a vicious kick to the thug fumbling with Sophia's ropes. The man crumpled unconscious. Nico's team swarmed in, rifles sweeping. Boss, we're clear! Nico shouted over the ringing silence as the last echo of gunfire died. Esposito's men lay groaning or inert on the ground. Dante didn't even acknowledge Nico yet. He rushed to Sophia. Her wrists were still bound behind the pillar. It's okay, he murmured, almost babbling as he pulled a pocket knife and sawed at the ropes. You're safe now. I'm here. As soon as the cords gave way, Sophia hurled herself into Dante's arms with a broken sob. Relief and anguish poured out of her in equal measure. Dante crushed her to his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. I've got you, he whispered, voice thick. I've got you. For a moment, it was as if they were alone in that warehouse. Sophia burrowed against him, her fingers clutching his shirt. Dante closed his eyes, silently thanking any power that be that she was alive and relatively unharmed. A low groan snapped Dante back. Salvatore Esposito was dragging himself toward a dropped pistol with his one uninjured arm. Dante's face went grim. Gently, he eased Sophia back. Stay here, he said, then strode toward his enemy. Esposito rolled onto his back, gun now shaking in his bloody hands. He fired, a single deafening shot. Dante felt the burn of a graze across his upper arm, but he didn't slow. Before Esposito could fire again, Dante kicked the weapon from his hand. You took her family from her, Dante growled, looming over the wounded man. Esposito bared his red-stained teeth in a defiant grin. It was just business, he rasped. Dante's vision tunneled. All he could see was Sophia at age 8, left orphaned and alone by this piece of filth. His own childhood scars, her pain, it all fused into a righteous fury. And this, Dante hissed, snatching up the fallen pistol, is justice. The single gunshot Dante fired was deafening in the quiet. Esposito fell back with an ugly gurgle. The light in his eyes snuffed out almost instantly. Silence reclaimed the warehouse, broken only by Sophia's soft sob and Nico barking for someone to call an ambulance for the injured, those still alive anyway. Dante let the gun slip from his fingers. It clattered to the cement. He turned at once and saw Sophia watching him, her expression a mix of shock, grief, and overwhelming relief. The blood splattered across Dante's shirt, and the smoking gun at his feet told the story of what he'd just done. Would she fear him now? Heart pounding, Dante approached her slowly. Sophia. Before he could say more, she bridged the gap between them and flung her arms around his neck. "You came for me," she choked out, voice trembling against his collar. Dante wrapped her up in his embrace, holding her so tight it was hard to tell whose heart was beating faster. "Of course I did," he murmured into her hair. "I'll always come for you." Her answering sob was half laughter. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Tears carved tracks through the grime on her cheeks, but she was smiling. A small, quivering smile of pure gratitude and affection. Dante brushed his thumb gently across her face, wiping away tears. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I'm sorry I put you in danger. This was all because of me." Sophia covered his hand with hers on her cheek. "No," she said, fierce despite the tears. "It was because of men like him." She glanced toward Esposito's lifeless form, a flash of hatred crossing her features, then shuddered and refocused on Dante. Her gaze softened. "You saved me, and the orphanage. I don't know how I can ever repay that." "You owe me nothing," Dante whispered, his throat constricted painfully. "I'm the one who owes you everything." A slight commotion surrounded them as Nico's men finished securing the site, but Dante and Sophia paid it no mind. Carefully, he peeled off his jacket and draped it around Sophia's shoulders once more, noticing with relief that beyond bruises, she seemed unharmed. As he led her out of that place of death and into the cool night, Dante kept an arm firmly around her. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone must have reported the gunshots. It didn't matter. They were leaving it behind. "Where do you want to go?" he asked Sophia softly once they reached the car. "Home? The hospital?" Sophia's fingers dug into his shirt, as if terrified he might let go. "With you," she whispered. "I just want to be with you." Dante closed his eyes briefly, emotion surging in his chest. "Then with me is where you'll be." Later that night, safe in Dante's private penthouse, they tended each other's wounds with gentle care. In the hush of his living room, every touch held unspoken affection. When Sophia finished bandaging Dante's arm and looked up at him, gratitude and longing shone in her hazel eyes. Dante couldn't hold back any longer. He cradled her face and brought his lips to hers in a tender, reverent kiss. Sophia melted against him, returning the kiss with all the emotion she'd kept locked inside. In that quiet moment, the walls around their hearts finally crumbled. Breathless and trembling, they rested their foreheads together. Sophia let out a soft, joyous laugh, and Dante realized he was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in years. Neither had expected to find love in the midst of danger and darkness. But here in each other's arms it felt destined. Dante held her close that night, silently vowing to protect and cherish this woman who had brought light into his life. And in Sophia's eyes he saw not fear or pain, but hope for both of them. In the aftermath, Dante used his power and wealth to secure St. Catherine's future. The orphanage was repaired and well-funded, and the children never went hungry or cold again. Sister Margaret called Sophia and Dante her guardian angels. Dante gently insisted Sophia take time off from work to recover, even paying her salary while she healed. With her days free, they spent many afternoons at the orphanage together. Dante, once feared, soon became a beloved fixture among the kids. He discovered a quiet joy in reading stories, fixing broken toys, and simply watching Sophia light up around the children. For the first time in years, Dante felt pure, honest happiness. One soft spring evening, as the sun set golden over the city, Dante and Sophia walked hand in hand in the orphanage garden. Laughter from the children echoed behind them. Dante stopped under a blooming oak and turned to her, his dark eyes warm. "You changed my life, Sophia," he murmured. "You brought light into it." He took a steady breath, emotion thick in his voice. "I love you." Tears of joy sprang to her eyes as she smiled up at him. "I love you too, Dante, with all my heart." He drew her into his arms and kissed her tenderly. In that kiss was every promise of hope and healing. They had turned pain into purpose, loneliness into love. At long last, in each other, they had found home.